There is a kind of guilt that arrives for no reason we can name, a heaviness we cannot trace to anything we actually did wrong. And there are moments we behave in ways that make no sense even to ourselves. Reactions, urges, sabotage that seem to come from a stranger living inside us. By the end of this video, we are going to understand a truth that reframes all of it. That guilt and that irrational behavior are not malfunctions, they are signals, they are our essence, screaming to be heard, and we will name the one thing that is actually asking for. But first, who this is for? This is for those of us who feel guilty for resting, guilty for saying no, guilty for taking up space, for existing, for wanting more, without ever being able to point to what we did wrong. The ones who sometimes watch ourselves act out and think that isn't even me. If we have ever felt haunted by a guilt or a behavior we could not explain, this one is for us. And we are going to meet it with curiosity, not condemnation. Let's name it precisely. We sit down to rest, and within minutes a low hum of guilt rises as if resting were a crime. Someone offers us something good and we feel we do not deserve it. We achieved the thing we wanted, and instead of joy there is a strange hollow unease. Or, and this is the one that frightens us most, we suddenly behave in a way that shocks us. We push away the person we want closest. We sabotage the moments right before it gets good. We snap, we shut down, we run, and afterwards we stand there thinking, where did that came from? That isn't me. And then comes the second layer. We feel guilty about the guilt, ashamed of the behavior. We pile judgment on top of confusion, and the whole thing becomes a knot we cannot untangle. Here is the first gentle offering, that guilt with no source and that behavior that does not feel like us. They are not signs that we are bad or broken or beyond repair. They are signs that something inside us is trying desperately to get our attention. Let's widen the lens, because this is where it gets liberating. For most of us, guilt was never morality, it was about survival. As children, when the people we depended on were unhappy with us, that unhappiness felt life-threatening, because to a small child, losing the love of a caregiver genuinely is a kind of death. So we learned to feel guilt as a warning system. I have done something that might cost me love, correct it immediately. And for many of us, that system got set to maximum. We learned to feel guilty not for doing harm, but simply for having needs, for being too much, for wanting, for taking up room, for being. So now, as adults, the guilt fires even when we have done nothing wrong. Because the original wiring was never about being wrong. It was about don't lose the love. The guilt for resting, for saying no, for existing fully, that is the old survival program still running, still trying to keep us small enough to be safe. And the irrational behavior, that is the other half of the same story. Underneath the self we were allowed to be, there is the self we actually are, our essence, and the more we had to suppress that essence to be accepted, the louder it eventually gets. The self-sabotage, the sudden reactions, the urges that do not match who we think we are. These are very often our buried, authentic self breaking through the floorboards. Not to destroy our life, to reclaim it. This is the heart of it, so let's slow down here. Every one of us has an essence, a core, a true nature, the person we were before the world told us who we needed to be, and then, layer by layer, life builds a second self on top of it. The self that learns to please, the self that learns to perform, the self that learned which part of us were welcome and which had to be hidden. Most of us have been living for years as the adapted self, the version trauma and the world shaped, while the essence waits underneath, increasingly unwilling to stay quiet. The irrational guilt is often the friction between between those two cells. When we rest, when we receive, when we choose ourselves, the adapted self panics because those things were once dangerous. The guilt is the alarm of the old self, but the very fact that we did the thing, that we rested, received, chose ourselves anyway, that is the essence pushing through. And the behavior that does not feel like us. Listen closely, it is not a stranger. It is the most us. It is the essence after years of being silenced, finally screaming through whatever crack it can find. It is our soul saying, in the only language we left it, I am still here. Stop abandoning me to be who they wanted. Come home. The symptom is not the enemy, the symptom is the messenger. And the messenger is always underneath everything. Come back to who you really are. Here is the practice for the next time the nameless guilt rises or the behavior we do not understand take over. First, instead of fighting the feeling or shaming ourselves for the behavior, we pause and place a hand on the center of the body, the chest or the solar plexus that's just below the ribs, where guilt and gut feelings tend to live. We take one slow breath and instead of asking what is wrong with me, we ask the feeling directly, what are you trying to bring me back to? And then we get very quiet and we listen, not for words from the mind, but for the response of the body. Sometimes it is a wave of grief, sometimes it is a long buried need to rest, to be held, to be allowed to be free or to create. Sometimes it is just a softening, a sense of something inside us finally being turned toward instead of away from. And then we say to it, to that essence, that soul, that very true self, I hear you. I'm sorry I left you to become who they wanted. I am coming back. We will not undo decades of conditioning in one breath. That is not the goal. The goal is this. Every time we meet the guilt with curiosity instead of obedience, every time we treat the strange behavior as a message instead of a flaw, we move one step closer to the self that has been waiting under the floorboards this whole time. Remember what I promised, that the sourceless guilt and the behavior that does not feel like us are not malfunctions, but signals. Here is the full truth of it. The guilt is the old survival self still trying to keep us small enough to be loved, and the irrational behavior is the essence, the soul refusing to stay buried any longer. One is the voice of who the world made us, the other is the voice of who we actually are, and the more unhinged the behavior, the more that voice wants to push out. And the healing is not in silencing either of them. It is in learning to tell them apart so we can finally start listening to the right one. We are not broken when we feel guilt for existing. We are not crazy when we act in ways we cannot explain. We are a true self fighting its way back to the surface through every crack it can find. The discomfort is not the sign that something is wrong, it is the sign that something real is trying to come home. And the most sacred thing we can do is stop slamming the door and finally answer. And here is what I want to ask us to carry into this week. The next time the nameless guilt rises, when we rest, when we receive, when we choose ourselves instead of obeying it, we are going to put a hand on our chest and ask, what are you trying to bring me back to? And we are going to treat the answer as sacred information as it is and not as a verdict. That single question is how we start to follow the soul's signal home. If this video resonated for you or named something that you have been carrying in confusion and silence, I want to ask you to finish this sentence. The guilt I can't explain is really my soul asking me to ... In the comments, there is no wrong answer. Saying it out loud is often the first time the essence has ever been spoken for instead of silence. I read every single one, we read every single one, with no judgment, only the deep recognition that we are all finding our way back to who we really are. Until next time, thank you so very much for listening. As always, please like and subscribe if you support my content. It really helps me out with the algorithm. I love you all so very much. Stay safe, stay unharmed, and remember frequencies power. Bye. I said 10 10 10. Bye.